Hi, we are Group 5, and this is our study on the effects of cyberbullying to the social interaction of adolescents. Now, for our introduction, let us start with the background of the study. Cyberbullying is considered a relatively new form of bullying which utilizes online communication technology. Perpetrators of cyberbullying have regained further exposure, wider ranges of target, and anonymity. Consequently, a study by Nixon from 2014 states that bullies are not able to realize the extent of harm they cause towards victims because of the further lack in online supervision. Online bullying against adolescents has become a worldwide public health concern due to the accessibility of social media networking platforms, particularly causing problems in mental health. Victims have been observed to have increased tendencies for depression, anxiety, suicidal behavior, and somatic symptoms. For instance, 93% of participants in the Nixon study reported negative side effects after theoretical cyberbullying incidents. The victim will also have an increased possibility to have behavioral changes such as being aggressive and using substances. So, it also showed that people who are involved in cyberbullying and affective disorders have significant relationships. The example results provided also showed that cyber victimization has a significant relationship with depression along with the minority. It was also stated that higher levels of cyber victimization is correlated with higher levels of depression. Social interaction is a systematic social action between a group of people. In this situation, the person will change its actions and reactions with respect to the actions one is interacting with. There are different kinds of social interaction, namely accidental, repeated, regular, and regulated. Social interaction is a way of how groups of people interact and exchange information. Now let's move on to the statement of the problem. Well, this study mainly seeks to answer the following questions right here. First, what are the social anxiety, social avoidance, and emotional performance scores of the cyberbullying victims? Is there a significant difference between the social anxiety of victims and non victims? Is there a significant difference between the social avoidance tendencies of victims and non victims? And lastly, is there a significant difference between the emotional performance of victims and non victims? Now here we have our theoretical framework. Starting with the effects of cyberbullying, we will analyze the social and emotional performance scores of victims, as well as the scores of the non-victims. Afterwards, we will analyze the difference in the presence of social anxiety in both victims and non-victims. After that, we will also analyze the difference in social avoidance between victims and non-victims, and lastly, analyzing the difference in emotional performance of both the victims and the non-victims. Moving forward to our scope and the limitations, the researchers will be quantifying the effects of cyberbullying in social interaction behaviors through a Likert scale, through interviews and questionnaires with the participants. The research determines their social anxiety, social avoidance, isolation, and emotional performance scores. Verified social anxiety and emotional performance tests will require professional supervision, and brain network observation will not be utilized. For the survey questionnaire, only fixed criterion for selection of 30 participants in their age 13 to 19 interviewees. However, these will be handpicked by our researchers. Now let's move on to the definition of the terms. So the researchers will define the following both conceptually and operationally. Cyberbullying. Cyberbullying will be defined as a threatening and willful act carried out by a group or individual using any electronic means against a victim who cannot easily defend themselves. Next, we have social interaction. It will be defined as an exchange between two or more individuals, and it is a building block of society that can be studied between groups of two, dyads, triads, or larger groups. Next, we have adolescents. These will be referred to as individuals between 10 to 19 years old. youth between 15 to 24 years, and young people between 10 to 24 years. In this research, particularly, adolescent refers to the victims at an adolescent age who experience cyberbullying. Lastly, we have emotional performance. Emotional performance, as utilized in this research, is defined as the overall ability to trust and the states of safety within peer relationships. Now, moving forward with our methodology. First, with our research design, the following research will be utilizing a phenomenological research design. It will involve in-depth interviews with participants and a study on the effects of target demographics as opposed to a control group. It will be set to analyze the different behaviors which may occur during a specific situation. Afterwards, we have our research locale. The research setup will involve two interviewees, of which are cyberbullying victims. Additionally, this setup will require 25 to 30 randomly selected survey participants, of which are a mix of victims and non victims. That is, their answers will be evaluated correspondingly to which classification they are part of before a comparison is conducted. Next, we have our research instrument. The researchers will be conducting their interviews through a Zoom call. On the other hand, surveys will be conducted through a Google Forms questionnaire. Questions will be administered through the interview, and the survey will be classified to correspond to either of the following variables: social anxiety, social avoidance, and emotional performance. Next, we have our statistical treatment of data. To interpret the data effectively, the researchers gathered data using their own close-ended survey distributed randomly. The researchers used Likert scale in the survey questionnaire in order to measure the respondents' fear of the specific sample scenarios provided. The researchers also used Microsoft Excel, a spreadsheet, with encoded formulas for its statistical computations in order to ensure the credibility of the collected data. The researchers used the t-test in order to analyze the data as this statistical tool determines the significant difference between two variables and whether they have a significant difference or not. Moving forward, let us discuss the data analysis and interpretation. Descriptive data analysis. Descriptive data analysis made use of the mean in order to describe the level of social anxiety, social avoidance, and the emotional performance scores of both the victims and the non victims. Afterwards, we have our inferential data analysis. The inferential data analysis made use of the t-test to sample, assuming equal variance, to measure the significant difference between the level of social anxiety, the level of social avoidance, and emotional performance scores of both the victims and the non-victims. So now let's discuss our results. Right here we have table 1. Table 1 shows the results of the level of social anxiety of the cyberbullying victims and non-victims. It can be seen that when taken as a whole, the social anxiety level of victims were described as very afraid with a mean of 4. Furthermore, the non-victims were given a similar questionnaire, and their social anxiety level was described as not afraid at all with a mean of 1.6. Now we have our table number 2. Table number 2 right here shows the level of the social avoidance of both the victims and the non-victims of cyberbullying when taken as a whole. It can be seen that according to the mean, which is 4.5, the, low, the, the social avoidance level of victims were described as extremely afraid. In addition, the non-victims were given a similar questionnaire and their results showed with that of a mean of 2.5, they were described as slightly afraid. Now we have our table 3. Table 3 right here shows the emotional performance scores of the cyberbullying victims and the non-victims. It can be observed that when taken as a whole, the emotional performance scores of victims were described as average with a mean of 3.75. However, with the non-victims, that also took a similar questionnaire, they were described as extremely high with a mean of 1.75. Now, for our last table, we have table number 4. Table number 4, on the other hand, shows the results of the significant difference between the social anxiety and social avoidance and social and emotional performance scores, of both the victims and the non-victims. It can be taken that when taken as a whole, the null hypothesis can be rejected by having a t-value of 0.43 and a p-value of 0.33. The researchers then can conclude that there is a significant difference since the p-value is lower than the t-value. In this study, the researchers aim to identify if there is a significant difference between the social anxiety, the social avoidance, and the emotional performance scores of cyberbullying victims and the non-victims. The level of social anxiety, the level of social avoidance, and emotional performance scores may differ depending if one is a victim or a non-victim. Furthermore, the result implies that if one is a victim of cyberbullying, it is most likely that one will be more afraid compared to non-victims when it comes to social anxiety, and- as well as social avoidance. In addition, victims will also have a lower emotional performance score when compared to the non-victims. Now let us discuss the interview. So first we have the social anxiety part of the interview. According to one of the interviewees, after being cyberbullied, he or she would avoid socializing with their peers, and that if he or she were given a choice, he or she wouldn't open up to their family and friends regarding the problem of being cyberbullied. Another interviewee was hesitant to approach their friends because they were scared that their friends would not view them the same way as before. Now let's talk about social avoidance. One of the interviewees was forced to transfer schools after the incident of being cyberbullied. According to the interviewee, upon transferring, they were not able to make any friends till the end of the first term due to the fact that they were purposely avoiding them due to the past experiences they faced when they were cyberbullied. In addition, the interviewee stated that due to what they experienced, there used to be a time where they would speak up if needed, but because of being cyberbullied, they would avoid all of these instances. Moving on to their low emotional performance scores. Both interviewees had a hard time giving their trust to people because being cyberbullied greatly affected their emotional performance and social interactions toward both their peers and strangers. Until today, one of the interviewees does not know who bullied them, and this has caused the further deterioration of their emotional performance. Both the bullies of the interviewees were not penalized at all, despite the fact of greatly inflicting emotional pain to the interviewees. Now it's time to move on to our conclusion. First, we have our summary of findings. So, the victims had high levels of anxiety. How, However, non-victims, on the other hand, had low levels of anxiety, and the victims had high levels of social avoidance, while non-victims had low levels of social avoidance. With that, the victims' emotional performance scores are average, while the non-victims were extremely high. There is a significant difference noted between the levels of social anxiety, social avoidance, and emotional performance scores between the victims and the non-victims of cyberbullying. Now, for our main conclusion, in order to address the effects of cyberbullying to the victims, professionals suggest that they undergo therapy. They should also receive encouragement and help from those who are close to them, such as their friends and their family. So here are our media outputs, which can be seen right here. Here it is. And of course, we also have our cyberbullying laws right here with RA 10627, RA 10175, RA 9995, and RA 7610. And again, here are the solutions recommended by professionals in order to battle cyberbullying, with the first being therapy, with the second being to report the incidents, the third being encouragement, and the fourth being commendation. And with that, we end our presentation on our study on the effects of cyberbullying to the social interaction of adolescents. Once again, we are group number 5, and thank you very much.